Ulonga tabati yada tó yẹ kó máa da ifá. Inú tó yẹ kó jẹun lọ́ fi bí pa. Ọbàtálá, ọba takuntakun. Ṣàngó, Èṣù, Ògún, Ọya, Ọ̀ṣun. Ìwọ ló ń bọ̀ nílé. Kí ni ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ tán ṣe nílé yìí o? Ó jẹ́ lọ jára.
Alafia, peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Welcome to another episode of the African Spirituality Experience. I'm your host, Orisha Bemi, and today I have a special guest, Baba Yiser Ra Hotep. Baba, welcome to the channel. Appreciate you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, brother.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an honor and a pleasure. So, can you share with us how you originally got into the study of Kemetic culture and the Kemetic sciences and spiritual practices?
Well, when I was a young man in my early, probably late teens, actually, I'm going to take that back. Ever since I was a child, I was always interested in the roots of things. I always studied, even if we're just watching public television programs and documentaries that you would see on TV about ancient cultures. I was always fascinated by the pyramids and mysterious things, things that could not be explained and all that kind of stuff, So I've always had an interest in things that are different than just the mainstream. So when I got a little bit older, like in my late teens, early 20s, I started to, look for the roots of myself. And so I knew that I was a person of African descent. And so I was always studying about traditional African societies, like what you might find in West Africa and so on and so forth. But then I said, I want to go beyond that. I want to go beyond the colonial period. And I want to go back to the ancient times before, where everything first started, to get back to the root, And so that's when I started to become more interested in Ancient Kemet. And so I started reading books by Joseph Ben Jochanan, John G. Jackson, J.A. Rogers, many other scholars, about the history and about the culture of ancient Africa. And, so this was like over 50 years ago. So a lot of the people that people know of now, they weren't even born, or they were just children or whatever, but this was a long time ago. And so back in those days, you couldn't just Google stuff and look at videos online, because there was no online. So basically, we had to go to libraries. We had to go into archives, so in the 90s, I started to travel to Kemet. Mm-hmm. And once I started to travel there, then I had the opportunity to actually, experience the energy that's there in certain places, because the temples, the monuments, the pyramids, they're all built on certain parts of the earth that generate energy. They were, the location of those types of monuments and temples and so on and so forth, they were selected because of the energetic signature that they have, the energy that they emit from the earth, And so once you go there, not only do you feel energy, do you feel a change taking place in your mind in terms of your ability to pick up information, you also get a deeper idea of the history. Because say you go to a particular temple, like my favorite temple there is a temple that was built by Seti I and then completed by his son Ramses II, right? And so And so this temple, when I go there, I can sense that it was built upon something that used to be there, that there was an older edifice there that is sort of submerged or under the ground, and that this newer temple, even though it's thousands and thousands of years old, it was built on top of that. And so these places, this land, the various temples and monuments, they are repurposed, So I know I'm getting into a whole bunch of stuff, but
no, I love it. I love it because trust me, as you're speaking, I got my wheels are spinning. I got tons of questions to ask. So no, I love what you're sharing with us.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because it's funny because I've been a student of Kemet in the Nile Valley civilizations pretty much all my life. I just remember from a little boy, the first time I saw the pyramids, I said, that's somewhere I need to go. And I felt an attraction to it. Like I was drawn to it. And so that's kind of what got me into studying it. So I studied the works of Dr. York. He was probably the first, like I was considered master teacher who exposed me to the inner workings and the knowledge and the wisdom of the pyramids, but also a lot of the people who you named as well, Dr. Ben, Dr. Jackson, John Jackson. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, I can't think of the author's name, but the book Stolen Legacy. Was it George James? George
G.M. James, yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I started studying a lot of their work as well. And it just amazed me in regards to the profound history that was there, but also the energy and the power that is emitted, like you said, from just being in the environment. So I haven't had the opportunity to visit Ancient Kemet yet, but I've spoken to a lot of people like yourself and teachers who have been there. And every one of you have said the same thing about it changes you. And there's an energy that kind of like really, I feel like is invoked within you from just being in the environment. So one of the questions or one of the topics that I hear people speak about a lot is what the pyramids are. So in your perspective, from someone who's been there, someone who's been studying, someone who has a real, I feel like, deep tie and connection to Kemet, what would you say that the ancient pyramids are?
Well, that's a good question, and you have so many people who are putting out information, and a lot of it is speculative, a lot of it is just some of it, I would say a lot of it is propaganda and stuff too, to try to put across a certain point of view. So I'm going to say I don't have a definitive answer, because I don't see how people can have such definitive answers about something that there is so much contradictory and controversial evidence about, So I can tell you what my experience has been. So just to look at it from a sort of systematic way, what the traditional mainstream, scientific community says, is that the pyramids are built as tombs, and so, and I've been in pyramids. When you go to Kemet, there are about 125 known pyramids, and so the word pyramid, that's not the proper word. That's a Greek word. So the word for pyramid is either pronounced mer or merkut. So that's the ancient language. And so when you translate pyramid and you break down the word like pyra, that has something to do with fire and stuff like that, it gives you a whole nother meaning to it, because mer means love, right? And so it's a whole, like, what does this mean, right? So so I have been in pyramids or merkut that to me, they were probably built as tombs, because of the fact that you can see what the European scholars, they call it sarcophagus, which is the stone structure that the body of the deceased person, which more than likely was the pharaoh, or the I don't even want to use these words, but the so-called pharaoh, was entombed in.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see those there. When you go to the first known Merkut, which is built at Saqqara, that's what they call the step pyramid. You go about 180 feet down underneath the ground to the below the pyramid structure, and you can find the Neb Ankh, or the sarcophagus that Zoser, who was that third dynasty king who Imhotep worked for and designed and built that particular edifice for.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see evidence that in certain pyramids that they were partly used. I'm going to say partly used as a place to bury the person, right? Bury somebody, or to entomb their physical remains. But when you go inside of these structures and you spend time in them, like as I have, you have different experiences that speak to a more psychic and spiritual dimension to the effect that these edifices have. Now, my experience is my experience. I cannot say, well, based upon my experience, I cannot say definitively that the ancestors built these for the purpose that my experience gave me, right? I cannot say that, but I can say that there is more to it than just a structure to place the remains of a person. Now, when people talk about the pyramids, they are generally talking about the one pyramid, which we call the Great Pyramid. And so that's mostly people's reference points. Their reference points is not the other 100 and so pyramids. And so that Great Pyramid at Saqqara, not at Saqqara, but at Giza, on the Giza Plateau, that pyramid was built in the 4th dynasty, and it was supposedly built by a king whose name is Khufu.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so when you go there, you don't see any. There's no record of there being a Sahu, which is what they call the mummy.
Mm-hmm.
There's no record of them finding, like when they went into the tomb of Tutankhamun, they found they found his body, they found all his treasures and gold and other artifacts that was buried in there with them. With him, there was no evidence of these things being found in, at Giza in the pyramid of Khufu. But when you go inside the room where the supposed sarcophagus is, and you lay inside of that structure, as I have, then you have certain types of internal psychic, I would say spiritual, energetic experiences that in my opinion and in my experience relate to telepathy, time travel, the ability to have certain types of psychic experiences that maybe be related to precognition and what I might even call post-cognition, in terms of being able to having certain things revealed to you that existed before in the past, right? These are things that I experienced, because I had the opportunity to go inside their room alone and to be there undisturbed by the security and all those other people for an extended period of time. So I was able to go inside there and meditate. I know that inside of the what they call the sarcophagus is made out of a type of granite called red granite or rose granite.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, granite is very hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you are inside of that, it's about maybe 6 inches wide along the walls, and the walls of that structure, which they call, like the place where you put the coffin with the body inside of it. It is perfectly flat. It's perfectly aligned. The dimensions and everything are perfect. Like they use a precision instrument. I'm not saying that they use a machine or precision instrument, but they achieved the types of machining and the types of precision that you would need a precision tool today in order to achieve. Now, how they did it, I don't know. I'm not going to say some aliens came and all that kind of stuff, but they had the ability to do things that we don't know the explanation of. But when you actually hit, so if I go inside of there and I hit the side of that neb-ankh, that so-called sarcophagus, you can hear vibration, right? That normally you hit on a piece of granite, it's so solid, that you don't hear a vibration from it. But when you're inside of there, you can hear a vibration. And if somebody on the outside was to just put their hand against the wall, the vibration would stop. And so I know people who have gone inside the room where they call it the king's chamber. That's the common name. That's not the real name, but that's what they call it, the king's chamber. And people go in there and they play certain types of musical instruments. And those musical instruments, when you hit certain notes, they have a certain effect. They create a certain vibrational frequency, which may change the workings of the brain, how the frequency that the brain is operating on, which allows you to perceive your reality from a different perspective. You may be able to hit certain frequencies of sound. They may have a healing effect upon your body if you have an ailment, and so on and so forth. So there's another element of the Merkut that they are aligned to certain celestial bodies in the sky. And so they have a certain types of, I believe passionately that they are sitting on top of certain points on the earth that generate energy, which we commonly call a vortex, right? And so you go to places like Sedona, Arizona, and you can see, you can see places that people have identified as being vortex points or power points where the earth, the energy from the earth is spiraling up at a, in a certain way, And so the pyramids seem to be placed on these places. The temples seem to be placed on these places, different monuments. And even when you go to temples, within a temple, you can feel energy that is being that is in a certain room or a certain point location within the temple. So I believe that the ancestors was working with these things, and so I believe that some of the pyramids were used as places where you could achieve a high level of meditation that would allow you to have a very transcendent experience and to sort of free yourself of the what you would call the fetters or the chains or what's confining you from a consciousness level to this terrestrial plane, and then you being able to elevate yourself or elevate your awareness to a higher level. And so when people talk about, well, how did the ancestors do all these things that we cannot explain? Well, they were operating on a different level. They were going into temples. They was going into these different pyramids, and I'm speculating because, the pyramids were supposed to be closed off and you couldn't get into them, after a while. But again, there are different types of pyramids in Kemet. It's not just one type of pyramid. And also, when you go down further south into what they call Sudan now, what you would call Kush, there's 220 something pyramids down there, So it's so the idea of pyramids. This is a concept and a phenomenon that exists throughout the Nile Valley. So some people believe that the pyramids was used to generate energy, and that this energy was used to power certain things, that the water from the Nile Valley, water has a very, a very interesting types of effects. Water carries a current. Water carries a certain vibrational frequency, and just the flowing of water and the type of energy. And I can't go into all the details of the science, but water carries a certain electrical charge with it. And so when we go to the Great Pyramid of Giza today, we don't see the Nile River. The Nile River is far away. But in ancient times, there was either a canal or the river itself actually came right close to that pyramid. And so the water is a very important element in understanding pyramids. When you go to certain temples and you go to certain sites, like where the step pyramid is, there is, when you dig down far enough into the earth, you can hit water. And so you have flowing water underneath a lot of these structures. And so this water is probably interacting with certain types of other energies that they're generating from the structure of the pyramid. The pyramid itself, the structure of it actually generates energy. So when you talk about sacred geometry, certain shapes and forms are able to create energy that is then able to have a effect on the physical world and on the mind, on the consciousness, so just dealing with certain shapes, dealing with certain forms and so on and so forth has an effect upon consciousness. So when you start looking at people who exist today, like the people of Tibet and other places in the East, they deal with the yantra, and they designing these different shapes and forms that when you look at them, when you perceive them, and even when you actually take out the time to actually create them, they're changing your consciousness, right? And so all of this is part of what I would call the type of yoga, just to use that as a general term, the yoga and meditation and internal energy work, internal transformational work that the ancestors was doing. This is all part of what they was doing,
Right.
And so so when you talk about the pyramids, they have, to me, they have multiple purposes and have multiple effects, most of which cannot be explained by the minds of people that's living today. So most of the things that people do now is speculate.
Right. So you said something that it just amazes me, and I'm curious to find out. You had the opportunity to meditate in one of the chambers. Is that something that they offer to everyone, or is that something that, because of the relationships you have from someone who's been there as many times, you've been able to kind of work your way into being able to have access to that opportunity?
No, they don't offer that to nobody unless you pay them a lot of money. So, and I didn't pay them any money. I just went at a time early, so years ago, I went there years ago. And when the security and stuff wasn't as tight as it is, and I went at a time of day when the security guy, he's not really security, he's just like a guy that goes there and
try to act like he's somebody.
Gets people to come in and out, and so this particular time, this guy he just left. I was still in there. So I was able to get inside of there and just stay there. I stayed in there for, maybe a couple of hours, and generally they have people, they rush you in. Most of the time, tourists, they come up, you gotta come up this long distance at an angle, through a shaft. And so another thing people should understand is that from what I know, that these pyramids, they weren't designed for people to go in and out of like they do now.
Right.
The entrance ways that are used to go inside, let's say the Great Pyramid, because we just talking about one pyramid. That's what people got to get past their mind.
Right.
We talking about one pyramid, and it's more than it's three big pyramids, and then it's other smaller pyramids on that same site at Giza. And so so we always think it in a mono way, but it's actually more. Right. So in this one particular pyramid, and different pyramids are built differently. Some of them are built with a different type of stone than the other ones, so on and so forth, And one thing I want to say too, people often say, "Oh, they got pyramids in China. They got pyramids in Central and South America and stuff like that, right?" And they have shapes of buildings, but they are not the same structure. They are built differently, and they were used for different purposes. If you go to Mexico and you go to Central America, you go to the pyramids that are usually attributed to the Aztecs and the Mayans. They are not built in the same way as the pyramids of Kemet were built, and they're not utilized in the same way. Those pyramids, you can go up the steps, and they have an altar at the top of it where supposedly they would do different sacrifices and stuff. Some people said that they was doing human sacrifice. I don't know, but there was nothing like that at the Great Pyramid. When you go to the Great Pyramid in Kemet, the walls of it, the actual original outer wall of it has been dismantled. So it's not even there anymore, because it used to be a smooth, flat limestone. Okay. I think limestone. Yeah. And that stone has been removed. Okay. And that's why it looks like steps or stairs. It looks like you just see these giant blocks of stone that you can climb up and go in, go around. But those, it used to be a flat surface. What happened to the original outer structure of the Great Pyramid is that it was taken when the Arabs invaded. They dismantled all of that, and they took that stone and they built mosque with them. So there's a big fort there, a fort and a mosque there that they built, during the time that they invaded. So
they stole the stone that was part of the Great Pyramid and used that to build their mosques?
Yes, they dismantled. You can basically say, like, they dismantled the Great Pyramid. Now, the inner portion of it is still there, because we're talking about so many millions of stones, and each stone weighs an average of 2.5 tons, right?
Yeah.
But that shows you the tremendous amount, because they built big, humongous temples just with the stone that they took from the outer casing And so when I go there, when I take people on tours there, I show them where you can still see the remnant of the outer casing at the base of the pyramid. And then you can see where it stops, and then where you just have these hollowed out spaces where you see the blocks.
Wow.
And so, and this is the case all over Kemet, where stone temples have been dismantled, where our artifacts, our images on the walls have been defaced.
Even the Sphinx.
At the temple of Luxor, okay, which is in the city that they now call Luxor, they actually built a mosque right inside of the temple. Another part of the temple, during the Roman period, they, when you go back towards the end of the temple, you see these murals of Romans that they built, that they drew and built, and where they defaced the original stonework, and they put up this Roman motifs and Roman looking concepts of art and so on and so forth. And so you can actually see this painted area where they painted themselves on the walls. You go to other temples, like you go to the temple that they call the temple of Isis, and it's on the island. And when you go there, you see that they have chopped out all of the images of the Kemetic Neteru. That's what the other people call a goddess, right? Right. That they have defaced her image, and then they put up other images that represent Mary. You know, the
you talk about a stolen legacy. That's plagiarism at its finest.
Yeah. So so that's what's happening. So a lot of times people, they look at the art or they look at the statues from Kemet, and they see that the nose is being defaced. But also, when you look at those images where the nose is broken, if you look more closely, you see that oftentimes the eyes are broken, the ears are broken, the mouth may be damaged, and so the damage that you see in Kemet, you have to look at it from different time frames. Some of that damage is being done by the religious fanatics that came in during the Christian period. And so the Christians would deface. You go to the temple of Heru, okay, at Dendera. And that temple, you could see huge marks chopped into the large pillars that hold the temple up, the columns that hold the temple up. And you see that they tried to actually chop it down like you chop down a giant oak tree or something. And they actually tried to chop. You see these big, huge, almost a foot deep, chops, in these columns, and so you see a lot of damage. So some of the damage may be because, they wanted to deface the nose to show that the person was not, they wanted to hide the fact that these were Black people. But a lot of that damage is done for different other purposes. So the religious part of it, and sometimes even in ancient times, a person who may not have liked you would damage your statue after you died. Because you may have been their rival for the throne, or you may have been some type of a political rival, and so they may have damaged your statue. So from the perspective of a scholar who's actually trying to find the facts, not just say, oh, they don't, it's the racist. You have to find the multiple reasoning, or the additional reasons why these things happen. I'm not saying, everything, the bottom of all this stuff is all racism.
Oh yeah.
White supremacy, but you got to look at the way that it manifested in different circumstances.
Wow. Wow. So in regards to meditation, because that's something that I know is very significant in regards to the work that you do, what would you say has changed how your meditation practices are now prior to like your first time experiencing the energy at the sites of ancient Kemet?
Well, I'll give you an example. Like when I first started to practice yoga, I've always practiced yoga from an African perspective. And so when I got into yoga, I had an understanding that everything in terms of what we call civilization, what we call the arts and sciences of civilization, had their origins in ancient Kemet. And so we just assumed that yoga had its origins in ancient Kemet, even though we had not maybe done as much of the research initially to know the exact parameters of it. But when I started to meditate, because I would read books about yoga, the only books that were around about yoga were books that was, from India. And so when I first started meditating, I would meditate like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I would start seeing these Hindu deities, in my mind, And so I immediately said, no, I don't want to see y'all. And so I started to replace them with Aset and Asar and Heru and Heteru because I knew who they were. Gotcha. So I said, I'm gonna put those, I call them archetypical, they're archetypes. They are symbolic representations of certain universal concepts, right? Aset, Asar, Heru, Heteru, Ma'at, so on and so forth. So they represent certain conceptualizations of reality. They represent certain aspects of nature, right? And so no, I don't have nothing against the Indian things, but that ain't my culture. My culture is coming from Africa, And so I replaced those. So I consciously replaced those images in my mind, And then when I started to travel to Kemet, and I would have certain experiences where certain meditational practices would sort of come to me. Certain movements and postures would come to me. See, what I do, I'm very, I ain't trying to brag or nothing, but I'm very observant. Okay, and I take a lot of time to study the minutia of different symbols. Like I might study the minutia of even how that when you look at ancient Kemetic art, how the hand is held. Okay, because you see a lot of times you see people in our community, they do like this, they do their hand like this. Yeah. That's not this bent wrist like that, that's not found in Kemet. What they do this. A straight hand out like this, with the wrist straight. And then if you look at my thumb, and you look at my other fingers, right? So if I was doing what people call Tai Chi today, this is how I would hold my hand. So when you you go to the temples in Kemet and you look at images where the divine is sending energy from their hand into the nostril of the human. So the human is receiving life force from the divine source. The hand is always in this structure, the same way that it is when you learn how to properly practice something like Tai Chi. So this is called Tai Chi hand. So this hand position is identical to what you would see in the vast majority of those images. And so what you see is the Ankh, which represents life, coming from the palm of the divine source, of that so-called Neteru, or that so-called deity. And you see the Ankh coming from the palm and representing the energy, the life force that is coming from the hand, from the source, from the divine source into the nostril of the human being who is receiving, who has demonstrated through their way that they live their life, right? That they have made themselves worthy to receive this gift of life from the divine source. And so what you often see, you see the Ankh, and then you see a wasp. So the wasp is like a staff. It's like the head of a certain animal. And, so it's called the wasp, W-A-S, the staff. And so you see Ankh, wasp, Ankh, wasp. And so the wasp represents power. You see life and power being bestowed upon the human from the divine source, right? So, and so in your meditation, you want to manifest this connection between yourself and the divine source. When you're doing your movements and your postures, you're trying to do your movements and your postures in a manner that is reflective of what you see in the images on the wall. So when we do Kemetic yoga, we adhere to certain principles and concepts. So we adhere to something that we call geometric progression. So we know that our ancestors created this mathematical science called geometry, right?
Yes.
And so when you look at those images on the wall, when you look at the human form on the wall, every form that has been created follow a certain formula or proportion with the head, the neck, the torso, the length of the arms, in the great artifacts that was created using the traditional methods by the masters who were dedicated to the perpetuation of the quality of work that was established by their ancients, right? They adhere to these principles. And so there's a certain law of proportion that governs how the human body is being portrayed. And so when we do Kemetic yoga, we try to adhere to that. And so that's what we call geometric progression. So we want each one of our movements and our postures. So if I put my hand like this, I need my hand to go like this. I need my arm to be straight out like that. And I need this to be straight. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing my arm like this. I'm not like, ooh, like I got pain. I'm doing my movement and my postures precisely because the human body is made in a precise manner. And so you can do a movement and a posture in such a way that it's actually going to generate energy, and it's going to increase blood circulation, that is going to affect the lymphatic system in the body in a positive way, that is going to affect the structure of the muscle, the joint, the ligament in a certain way to make it healthier and more beneficial to your body. So we adhere to geometric progression. Geometric progression also deals with the idea of energy flow. When you are going through a Kemetic movement or posture, you are not just stretching your muscle. Like I have people say, I had somebody tell me, thank you for teaching us how to stretch. I said, I don't teach you how to stretch. You can go to a Pilates class, you just want to stretch. This stuff that we're teaching you is healing, internal healing, it's dealing with energy flow. Just like what you do in Tai Chi. If people are familiar with Tai Chi, Tai Chi is not just moving your arms around and doing like this. Tai Chi is actually drawing energy up your spine, bringing it to the crown of the head. In Kemetic yoga, we bring the energy to the crown of the head and then into the middle of the forehead. Because when you look at the king, he has a snake right on his forehead, right? In a lot of images, or a lot of statues and images. But you also see that snake moving from behind the neck, intersecting the center part of the skull. So you got two, so your brain is two hemispheres, right? You got the left and the right. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. And so we're trying to bring balance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic parts of the autonomic nervous system, right? So it's a whole lot of science behind what we do. It's not just based upon it looks like this, I'm gonna do that. So you have to really come and study what we do in order to really understand why and what the science is behind it. That's why we don't bend our wrists like this. We keep our wrists straight. Because we know that when you bend your wrist, you block off the energy. When you keep your hand straight, you allow the energy to flow. So the elbow is bent, not the wrist. And so, all of the people in the Kemetic community, they're like my friends. And sometimes I might say that. Sometimes it makes them angry. They think I'm trying to say something or whatever, but I'm really not. I'm just trying to say this is what I see. I ain't never seen this before.
Right.
I ain't never seen I've never seen that in any image from Kemet.
Right.
But it's something that's being popularized.
Yeah.
So you get so when you start to do these things in a precise manner, you are going to be able to have experiences. You're going to open up. It's like a key. If you take a key, you make a copy of the key that's supposed to fit into that lock, and a piece of that little teeth on the key is wrong. It's the wrong height or the wrong length, whatever. That key is not going to work. So you have to have your key be very precise. So your body is your key. Your breath is your key. And so you're trying to unlock that energy that exists. You're trying to move yourself, like we was talking about, different shapes and forms affect your subconscious mind. When you look at certain shapes, when you see certain types of configurations of shape and form, that has an effect upon your mind, upon your subconscious mind. They have a certain energetic effect when you see them. They generate a certain vibration. And so when you put your body into those shapes and forms, then you are achieving, you're unlocking certain aspects to reality. Your body itself is a pyramid. So if you look from here down to my shoulder, that is a pyramid. If you look from your ribs down to your pelvic, you're making a pyramid there. So this midsection of your body is actually a pyramid. And so you generate energy from this area of your body. Okay. So it's a whole lot of stuff that we learn and that we practice that is not normally part of the yoga curriculum that a lot of other people are teaching. Yeah, so that's our logo, and that is the image there is of a figure whose name is He, H-E-H. And we call this the pose of immortality. He represents eternity.
the whole process of meditation, I think it's funny that you said how you had to replace the imaging and the imagery that you were seeing in your mind. Do you believe when you got deep into your meditations and you started seeing the Indian figures, do you believe that was based upon some of the things that you've seen just in your regular life that was in your subconscious mind? Or do you believe that was just something that once you kind of like astral projected or whatever the experience was, in regards to when you got to a heightened level of elevation in your meditations, do you feel like the fact that you saw these deities from the Indian culture was something that was like maybe of subconsciously, or something that you just kind of elevated to and then you saw it and you was like, yeah, this is cool, but now I want to see the deities from my culture? Like, how do you think that took place? Because I think that's interesting that you said that, because I actually came across several other brothers who kind of got me back on track with my meditation practices, which I feel like I wasn't being consistent as I should have been, over the last few months. But over the last few weeks, I've tapped back into being consistent. But I've heard a lot about the Kriya meditation, or Kriya, however they pronounce it, and then of course the yoga, the Kemetic yoga is something that's new to me. Although Kemetic culture is not new to me, Kemetic yoga is. So do you feel like that was something that happened naturally and organically, or do you think that might have just been something that you might have had that was deep into your subconscious that kind of was activated while you're in that heightened, elevated meditative state?
Well, it was because of what I was reading. So I would study. So I've read all of the classic texts about yoga that comes from India, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
Now, I'm gonna say this, because I don't want to just put down India, because the original people of India was us. Okay, so you had a Dravidian culture, but the Dravidians, they established the first civilization on the Indian, what they call the Indian subcontinent, because it's in the southern part of Asia, and so those people, according to what I know, traveled out of East Africa and wound up in India, and then they established the civilization there. And so, but what happened is that those people over time were sort of infiltrated and sort of conquered by these other people, who eventually established a religion called Hinduism. And so many of the images that you see associated with yoga from India are not the original Indian conceptions of divinity. They are ones that come from the Hindu religion, and Hinduism is a much younger religion, but just like Christianity is a younger religion, the Hindu religion has gained a dominant space in the consciousness of people. So when you read these books and they talk about Kali and Vishnu and all these, different so-called deities associated with India, then you see them pictured the way that they're pictured, right? And so, so when you're reading these books about meditation and yoga, and you're reading these different texts, and you see these names and you see these images, that goes into your mind, right? And so so my goal is I want to be able to see. I study everything.
Me too.
I want to be able to study all the different religions, all the different spiritual traditions.
Yep.
But at the same time, and I want to understand them and appreciate them, but I don't want them to infiltrate into my consciousness.
Gotcha.
So your consciousness is whatever your consciousness is one of two things. It's whatever comes into your consciousness, and whatever you unthinkingly allow to become your consciousness, because you're just reacting and absorbing whatever energies and images and concepts and ideas that are just floating around.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can consciously create your own consciousness.
Right.
So most people are not ready to do the work that is involved with creating your own consciousness, because that means that you have to do an inventory. You have to clean out a lot of stuff that's based upon your past trauma, that's based upon your psychological conditioning, that comes from the culture, the society, the educational system, the religious system that we are under, And so you have to do a lot of deep work to really get rid of all of this conditioning, and it has to be ongoing, right? And so I decided that I wanted to be placed. I could have replaced those images with whatever I chose to replace them with. I chose to replace them with images and concepts that come from what I believe is my ancient culture, my own heritage. And I wanted to acknowledge that, And so this, just like, I acknowledge from ancient Kemet into Yoruba, into what they're doing in Cuba, Haiti, and so on and so forth, right? It's all, to me, it's all the same thing. It's just different language and maybe different labels, but it's all the same. And so that's my orientation. My orientation is African-centered, And so now you have a lot of people who are say, why be African-centered? And, Africa wasn't, Africa ain't nothing. All this, the pyramids, the Grand Canyon, and all this kind of stuff, and all this. It's like, I've been to the pyramids. I see these videos where people are saying, look, all of this stuff is in the Grand Canyon, and they showing pictures of temples and places in Kemet that I've been to. And I've been to these places about 35 times. And you telling me, they in the Grand Canyon. So if you ain't never traveled, you be saying, oh yeah, look what's in the Grand Canyon. And you can't go there because the military got it blocked off. And I've been to the Grand Canyon. I've explored the Grand Canyon. I ain't see all that. So, that's the age we live in, So you have to decide what's going to be part of your consciousness. You have to, sometimes you may have to go to libraries and go to archives instead of just watching videos. It's nothing wrong with video. I watch a lot of videos and I love to watch them, but this is a video, but it should not be looked upon as being scholarly work. Scholarly work. When I read the works of Yosef Ben Jochanan, John G. Jackson, John G. Jackson was one of my teachers. I was fortunate enough to go to a graduate program, which was called Inner City Studies in Chicago. And my teachers was Dr. Carruthers, Jacob Carruthers. My teacher was John G. Jackson. One of my teachers was John G. Jackson in that program, and other really exemplary scholars, right? And so we had to systematically go through information. We couldn't just say, oh, well, this sounds good, that sounds great, And so now we have people who have a disdain for anything that's based upon a systematic study.
Yep.
And so we say that's white man, that the white man created the scientific method. The scientific method was created by our ancestors.
Facts.
To be able to know that something is not going to fall down, you have to use this. You can't just be guessing. You can't just be hoping. You can't just be saying, "Oh, that sounds good to me. Let's do it like that." And then the thing fall down and kill you. The scientific method has to be based upon science. You have to be demonstrable that this is going to work. And then when you acquire your knowledge, you have to acquire your knowledge that you have to test. Is this really true? Is this factual? Is this accurate? And sometimes you have to stop doing what you was doing once you were become informed that wasn't factual. just like Wayne B. Chandler is a good friend of mine, right? And so he worked with Dr. Ivan Van Sertima and others, you know, at Rutgers to write the books. They came before Columbus, books about ancient Egypt, the Moors, and so on and so forth. They were often published books. They was called it like, I think it was called Light on Yoga, Light on Egypt Revisited. So they would publish books after they published the original book. They would publish books later that would clarify or correct some errors that they may have made in the original text. That takes a lot of courage, right, to do that. And it takes integrity to do that. But that's what you do if you are in search of actuality. You're in search of truth. You know, if you just want to get clicks and stuff like that, then you might just say all kind of stuff, you know, and never fact check yourself. So you as an individual, we have to fact check ourselves. Is what I'm believing actually true?
Yep.
When I go to Kemet, I get a different perspective. When I go to Africa, all Africans hate us. When I go to Africa, I ain't never been hated by no African.
Right.
You know,
love for me, all love.
You've been to Africa, they love you. They want you to come there.
Yes.
You know, and they're not just looking at you like for your money or whatever, because a lot of them got money.
And I dare to say, I feel like I got just as much, if not more, love in Africa than I do here in the States from Black people. I mean, we're gonna be real about it. So that's a misconception I think that's put out there by the people to try to keep us separated, you know, and try to create some type of division between us and, you know, our brothers and sisters on the continent. I don't believe that to be true, from my experience, anyways.
From mine either.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get mad love when I go places across, you know.
Right.
I've been to New Zealand. Man, going to New Zealand was like, man, it's like, you know, now these people, they are darker, they're not white, but they are darker skinned, and they recognize that their roots come from Africa. Right? The Maori people. And and even though they've been oppressed and down pressed and so on and so forth for all these centuries, they are in a concerted effort to reestablish their culture. And so when somebody like me go there to visit with them and to share Kemetic yoga, they treat me in their traditional ways, and which has all kinds of different protocols and stuff. And then they teach me about their mythology, what you know people call mythology, but I would call it their spiritual science, right? And it's very similar to Africa, and they recognize this, and they're seeking out Africa, whereas we over here, you know, a lot of us is seeking out, oh, we're not Africans, we this and that and the other, you know, and all this kind of stuff, you know, and they have a disdain for Africa, and I think that's part of the
programming.
Yeah, it's a program, and I think, you know, and you know, I don't know if you want to talk about all of this, but
no, listen, that's a whole nother conversation. But I do want to talk about how can we get the listeners access to some of your trainings or some of your teachings, because the yoga and the meditation, those are two things that I feel like I know there's a lot of healing involved. I know there's a lot of elevation involved in regards to our spirituality and our consciousness, et cetera, et cetera. So I know you also give courses or you also give lessons on that as well. So do you do this virtually, or is it like only in person, or like how can we get our listeners connected with you to see if, you know, we can kind of get some people signed up to take some courses with you?
So everything is on the website, KemeticYogaSkills.com. I think if you just type in yogaskills.com or KemeticYoga.com, I think either one of those would take you to the site.
Got you. And I'll definitely put that in the show description as well for all our listeners, so that way they can tap in and be able to get access to the information and connect with you. And then I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share the words of wisdom and knowledge. And I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about Kemetic yoga, because I know how beneficial I feel meditation is for me. And I've been hearing about yoga, even for someone like myself. So like growing up, I played a lot of sports, did a lot of hard labor work, you know, as an adult. And I have a lot of different ailments in my body. I don't know if it's arthritis or whatever the case may be, but just, typical pains and things of that nature, waking up. And so it's like, I've been told several times that yoga is something that can really help alleviate, a lot of that stress and a lot of, the tension and things going on in the body. So it's something that I'm definitely interested in learning about myself to kind of help get rid of some of the stuff that I deal with, on top of being able to like really access that different higher level of consciousness. Because just looking at your Instagram, I saw like just some of the poses that you do, like that takes true, real sheer power, to be able to put your body into those types of positions and, to be able to hold that the way you do. And I'm like, yo, that's something that it's really sparked the interest within me to kind of tap into and learn how to, get to that level of just adding value to, I think, the physical experience, in regards to learning new ways to channel energy.
Yeah, well, yoga in general and Kemetic yoga in particular is something you have to be dedicated to. You have to take out the time to practice. When I got into yoga, I decided that I wanted to become very good at it, and I felt like I'm 70 years old now, so I got into it when I was 21.
Wow.
So on my birthday, on October 17th is my birthday, then that'll be my 50th year in the practice of Kemetic yoga, right? And so I would practice once I experienced it. I would practice for 8 to 12 hours a day.
Wow.
every day for about 2 years. I practiced. I went to class 1 day a week for 1 year. The rest of the time I would practice. And so practicing makes, I ain't gonna say that, it's a cliche, practice makes perfect, but you have to practice.
Right.
So my body was very stiff, it was locked up. I had I had problems with my kidneys, I had ailments and stuff, and I was able to heal myself, to transform my body through yoga. I played football. I used to be an athlete. I played football on a high school, college level a little bit. And my fingers was messed up. All my fingers was jammed. And, I had a lot of different injuries to some of my joints and stuff, And so it was through the practice of yoga and also through changing my diet, detox and fasting, all this kind of stuff. This was 50 years ago, before all this stuff was popular.
Right.
I think I was a weird ball. I was the oddball, the weirdo. I was a health nut and all that kind of stuff, But
here we are at, 50 years later, looking like, I definitely wouldn't have said 70. I don't know what I would have gave, but I wouldn't have thought that you were about to turn 70. That's amazing. Like and that goes to show, and even like with the diet, and I've seen on your page as well that you, Queen Afua, that you guys have worked together, and Professor Kaba was on a couple of weeks ago. He was on the channel, sharing his words of wisdom with us, and he actually mentioned her as well in regards to us as a people, how we have to focus more on our health and be more health conscious, because it's like, we got a lot of people who are phenomenal, with their gifts and with their skills and the things that they're adding to the culture, but if you're not healthy, what is it all for? You have to be around, and we can't be around with longevity if we're not taking care of our body and preserving our health. So it's something that, I look forward to bringing more guests on like yourself that can teach us these tools and these strategies and just ways of life that can kind of really help us to get not just our spiritual aspects up, but also our physical aspects up in regards to health and creating, sustaining health and then longevity. So I look forward, to having these conversations again with you in the future. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share your words of wisdom with us today as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, brother. It was a great pleasure and to me to talk to you, and I appreciate you being willing to listen to me.
I love it. I'm here for it all day, every day. I love sitting and talking and listening, especially with the elders, because it's always a wealth of value, and you can't find this kind of information just anywhere. Like you said, back in the days, it wasn't out there on Google to be able to get access to this information. We had to do the actual work and the research. And I know people like yourself, just based off of your teachers, you're someone who has done that work. And that's what inspires me, to hopefully do that for our present generation and to be one of those names 40, 50 years down the line that people can relate back to. Hey, this person did this, did that, da, da, da. That's why I love sitting and talking with people like yourself, because to me, it's like that same information is being directly transmitted, you know, because you were there with them, you know, in person. I just studied them from their works years later, but you were actually there. And so, you know, I feel like, you know, us doing this work is definitely going to do something to impact our community and our culture, you know, to make a positive shift and a positive impact.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, I definitely appreciate you, Baba, and we'll definitely be in touch. And I'm going to share all the information in the show description, so that way people can reach out if they want to connect for whether it's the Kemetic trips, whether it's the Jamaican trips, or also with, you know, the lessons and the training programs and courses that you offer as well. And I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share with us, and I look forward to hopefully doing it again in the future.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, brother. And then you can feel free to put my phone number in there too.
Absolutely.
I answer my phone for everybody, you know.
I say. I'll definitely put that in there. I'm pretty sure people are going to want to find out more.
Okay, brother. I appreciate it.
Likewise. So I'll talk to you soon. I appreciate you, Baba.
All right, brother. Thank you. Hotep.
You're welcome. All right, Hotep. Peace and blessings, ladies and gentlemen. This has been another episode of the African Spirituality Experience. I'm your host, Orisha Bemi. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see y'all on the next episode. We out. Peace.
Ẹni tó gbàgbé ilé sàpò ìyàgbọ́ tẹ́ǹtì ẹni takísà ní tàtàn ò bá padà sílé anítìjàkọ ẹja lọ pé eégún mo sí ẹni gbẹ́rẹ́ ìpàkọ́. Forsake not your ancestors and praise your